Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington, and I am joined today by my new friend, who I think is going to be a good friend after just our few minutes of off mic talking, Jaeda Reed with Jaeda Reed Photography. Jaeda, thank you so much for coming in. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Thanks for having me. My name's Jaeda. Interesting spelling. It's got an extra vowel in there, Jaeda. I've been called Jaeda for most of my life. People like to stress it. But I'm the artist behind Jaeda Reed Photography. I really like to stress that I'm an artist because I think for me, my kind of selling point for my brand, it's the barrier of entry to photography is so low. You know, you can go to Costco and get a nice camera and get started and do your thing. But I really feel photography as an art form has kind of fallen by the wayside. So that's kind of where I started in terms of like building my business and my brand. Like I want to bring traditional art aspects kind of back into my work. Just because, like I said, I mean, it's so great that there's so many photographers working and it's so easy to get into now in terms of gear and equipment. But just I think my background is the most valuable thing that I can bring as a person. So
that's perfect. And I want to get into all that today. I think at least with the form and everything you filled out and kind of the background you gave for your schooling, and I looked at your site, I think we'll bring kind of a valuable viewpoint to that. I want to thank you again so much for coming in and saving me last minute. Full disclosure, I'm usually really good about getting the podcast interviews lined up. You know, I always have a backlog, and I don't right now, and I'm going out of town. Saturday, we're actually going to go watch a Survivor Series in Los Angeles. And I came to a freak out moment the other night, and I realized I did not have anybody that would be recorded for this episode. So you luckily had just reached out and like a boss came up and we got this going. And so I think that that's also a testament to kind of your work ethic and kind of getting everything going. And so I do really appreciate that. Talk about, photography. Have you always wanted to be a photographer? Where did that come about and how did we find ourselves here?
So that question that kind of comes up growing up, like, what did you want to be when you grow up? And like, for me, like, I can remember way back to like kindergarten, I wanted to be an artist, but in my limited worldview at that point, like I thought the only thing that you could do as an artist was to be a Disney animator. So awesome. As a little kid, like I'm sitting at this little writing desk I have, and I'm drawing like series of pictures, like a little flip book, and I was obsessed with this idea of like being an artist and growing up and doing this thing. And then at some point people tell you like that's not a real job. Like, oh, you're really good at this. Like, that's cool. But what are you going to like go to school for? And I was like, oh, like, okay, I guess I have to like pick a real thing because this isn't a real thing. And so I graduated high school, and it was one of those things like my parents were like, well, you got to go get a job or go to school, like one of those are your options. And I was terrible, 18 years old. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to school some more. So I went to PLU. A couple of my friends were going there, and at my like orientation thing, they were like, well, what do you want to do? This question that has like plagued me my whole life. And people tell me like art isn't a thing that you do. So I was like, oh, well, I like biology. And so she just like, okay. And she stuck me on this like biology track after like one question. And I was like, whoa. And I figured out my first year, I had to supplement all this heavy like chemistry and bio with like art classes. And I was doing just as much art classes as I was biology. I was taking like maximum credits to like do painting classes and things like that. And I remember Robert Wells was a journalism professor there. And he was kind of looking over, he got kind of stuck with him by chance. My advisor had like quit. And they were like, oh, well, here's this guy. He's got some time. Like, okay. I go into his office and he's like, okay, it looks like your biology is kind of your track and you have all these art credits. Like, are you double majoring? And I was like, oh no, like I just take those to keep myself sane. And he was just like, Jaeda, like if you're doing that to make yourself sane, like why aren't you doing this? And I was like, oh, like you're the first person, the first adult in my life who has been like, take this art thing and like make a career of it. And so he like really turned that around for me. So I I just dived into the art program there. I got to do some amazing things. I got to go study printmaking in China. I got to meet a bunch of wonderful people. And really my focus was painting. And then the year I'm supposed to graduate, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? Making it as a painter, I mean, realistically, is very difficult. And so, but I loved photography, and I had this camera that I bought like my freshman year. It was a Canon 40D, like my very first little crop sensor camera. And so I was like, well, you know what? Let's see if I like weddings. And so like my last year of school, as a gift to some high school friends of mine, Stephanie and Lee, I was like, let me shoot your wedding. Let me see how this goes. And they were wonderful. And looking back, the photos, there was some pretty photos in there. But I mean, really, everyone, if you think about your first wedding, you're like, oh gosh, I would have done this so differently. But they were wonderful. They still tell me they love their pictures. I love a lot of them, but just, the growth there. And so I was like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do photography. And so I graduated in 2013, and I have all the hope in the world and all the student loans looming on the horizon. And I'm like, oh gosh, how am I going to pay for these? And so I started applying to studios. I'm like, I'll just start somewhere low. Yeah, and Louis and Perler. And I applied to the Walmart photo studio. And Walmart is the only place that called me back. And I was just like, wow, maybe I suck. So I go into this interview, and they used a 40D in studio. I was like, oh, I have this. Like, I nailed the interview. I've been using Photoshop since I was 11. I nailed their whole editing process. I get the call like 3 days later that I didn't get the job. And I was like, what? I was in full on panic mode. That day I sat down, I got my business license, I got a website. I was like, I am screwed if I can't make this happen for myself. And I have literally done nothing but photography since. So it happened. It was a lot of ramen at first, but it happened.
That's awesome. I love that. I think I had a similar kind of going into college. I will say, for any colleges out there, this whole one question thing, because I think I had put teaching on, and then I signed, I show up at Gonzaga and it was all these, I'm like, I guess one thing, during the application. So colleges out there, stop doing that. And I also think that's fascinating too, because I too got disenfranchised with kind of applying to places and not finding the right fit. And so I ended up making my own fit by, starting my own company. Had anybody in your family been entrepreneurial, or was this kind of what did they think when you said, yeah, hey guys, I'm doing this?
So funny story about that. I didn't tell my parents for a long time that I had switched my major. It was probably up until my last semester when I'm like, hey, you're going to go to graduation and it's going to show me as a BFA on there. And not a Bachelor of Science, so get ready. And I mean, they were upset. I mean, understandably so. They were helping me pay for school, and they kind of felt like this wasn't a smart use of my time and effort and finances. And so they were, I think, frustrated at first. It was a very intense sort of thing. But they've really, I mean, seeing how my business has grown, they've really come around. But ultimately, people in my family, they're the traditional nose to the grindstone, hardworking family. My dad started as a ditch digger when he was 16, dropped out of high school, and now he's the public works director for the city of Ording. And he's got no formal education beyond his experience. And so people in my family, it's you start working and you just you claw your way from the bottom, and that's sort of what I've done, just within my own kind of structure. And, my mom was a computer programmer in the 80s, and she stopped to raise my brother and I. And so now she really struggles with her iPhone. We like to tease her about that. But yeah, I'm kind of the first person really to branch out into the art area, period. And kind of the first person to sort of pick up my small business and really try to run with it and make it a thing.
No, and I think even when you had said too about when you wanted to be an artist, and people had said well, that's not really because for me, when I went into news, that was at least one of the selling points of that was that I could give my mom something that then she could tell people she worked with, okay, well, my son is a news videographer. Because what does that mean? Like video production stuff, or what does that mean? Like photographer? Well, is she, but giving, kind of that defined thing. So I do totally kind of relate to that, where it's like, the trying to get, where the artist thing maybe isn't like a high selling point, or it's tough to kind of sell to your parents on that. So when you got to put your, your business license and all that together, what was that process like? Was that overwhelming? Were you scared, or did you just think like, I got to make this work and this is what I'm going to do?
It was really terrifying as like a, young 20 something. And I started out as like JR Photography because it sounded in my mind, this like more like gender neutral, almost masculine sounding name. That would be better. But it was really just, it was lacking any sort of personality and me behind it. So I put my real name on there in 2016, and it's been a lot better. But honestly, the whole taxes thing, like I'm a creative person. I am organized when it comes to like my business and my process. I can't handle the tax thing. And so just when I finally could afford to have someone else just here's all my stuff, just please figure this, like I can't, like I'm horrible at it. I am. I tell people that I'm a good photographer, and sometimes I'm not the best business person. But if I can outsource those things, I am so happy to do that. But ultimately, applying for the licenses and things was very simple, very easy. I just, it was super like nice and quick and online and modern,
Yeah, right. I think, I would have to say the same thing. Like, I think I did like the LegalZoom, LLC or whatever, ship it off. And I was like, oh, in less than 10 minutes, like we're going to do this. Yeah. That is funny too, and we've talked on the podcast with other folks about how, little of the time is whatever vendor you are, whether it's photography or floral or whatever, how little time you actually spend on, taking photos. And I think last night it was like 7:30 and I was like, oh, good. I get to edit video now today. I've worked since, 7 this morning, but now I'll actually be able to edit video tonight. Do you enjoy running the business? Do you enjoy that aspect of it? Or do you enjoy more just kind of like being on your own schedule and being able to take photos and things?
I enjoy the fact it's good now, like my 5th year into this, I can be more selective with my clients because I'm not so desperate for clientele and money. I can really kind of choose clients that appreciate my perspective and my work, and it's a lot less stressful for me. And so I think in college, I worked retail. I worked at Michael's, and it was soul sucking. No fault of Michael's. Michael's was a great company to work for, but just in a customer service position, I was working in and I was all, this bright-eyed, 18-year-old, like, oh, I'm going to work in the art department, and people are going to have, ask for my advice and things and care about what I say. And that's not, people don't have it. They don't care at all. Like, oh, what do you recommend here? Well, B is better because of this. Okay, well, A is cheaper. Thanks. And, that's what it is. And that's, that's fine. But, being in that environment where I didn't feel that my skill set was respected or valued was very, very hard. And so being able to kind of target these clients that are usually other creatives, musicians and other photographers tend to be who I work with. And it's so nice when you can kind of connect with someone who appreciates the difficulties of the creative career path and can really respect and work with you within that realm. That's my favorite.
Talk about, like you said, kind of musicians and more creative types. I mean, is that kind of the clients you attract, or who do you think you work well with, or what kinds of, client base do you have?
My favorite clients really and a perfect example of this is in 2000, the early 2010s, I had did senior photos for a couple. And I got to do their wedding 4 years later, and they're high school sweethearts, and then now I'm doing their anniversary photos and their Christmas photos, and so getting to be with clients and their families as their families grow and evolve, those are some of the most rewarding things for me. And so really, I do tend to attract a lot of the creatives because I really push myself as an artist. I care about a timeless image, especially in a time when it's so easy for photographers to just buy a set of presets, and with these crazy blown out highlights, like you mentioned in your last episode, this is a big trendy thing, and the wooden signs and things. And, if you want to have those in your photos, great, but I'm going to try to talk you down from like using props and everything, because it's going to date your pictures. You're going to look at them in 20 years and cringe the way we look at our parents', 80s photo walls and cringe. So my goal is really like simple and timeless and like emotional things that are going to age really well. And so I think a lot of people see like the vibrant, like true to life colors that I try to push. And so, those kind of images I can do for them, from engagement to wedding to maternity, and they'll kind of all like uniform over the years.
Yeah, it's tough. And I know what you mean kind of with, the trends. And I don't, I never know like what, because I just don't, I have a journalism background. Like I kind of just record things true to life. And, even like I'm not a videographer that like stages a lot of stuff or, people and do all that. And that's great. I mean, it's not wrong. It's just not, my mind doesn't work that way. But yeah, like I know like some photographers, I'll see like the galleries because they'll send them out, and it won't even be the same day, I mean, I'm talking like, it doesn't even look like we're in the same place. And so, and I don't know if that is right or wrong, or if obviously people are attracted to that and go for that. I mean, what is kind of your thought on that kind of ongoing look right now that seems to be really popular?
I think it's gonna look really dated in about 15 years. You're gonna have all these people that are kind of, in their late 20s, early 30s with young families and things, having these family photos done, and you're gonna look at them and you're gonna know what era they're from, and that's kind of the downfall. It's like the 80s photos. Some of them you can just tell, like this was taken in like 1983. And I want to really avoid that. I want things to sort of keep their kind of fresh feel. So I'm always telling clients, like, avoid even like trendy clothes, like in the early 2000s when it was like peasant skirts and like tank tops over t-shirts. Like if you had that picture on your wall now, you're going to know like that was 2002. Like, and so those kind of things, it's so. And maybe I have a different perspective on this because, when I was 11, I was pirating Photoshop. I'm legit now. Don't worry. I'm paid for the Creative Cloud. But as an 11-year-old with like LimeWire, giving your computer all kinds of STIs for music and things, I was downloading Photoshop. And so I've been working with that for a long time. And I just, it's not hard to play with it and develop your own sort of like editing style. And it's so easy now to buy a preset pack from another photographer and just apply it, Lightroom everything, and they all look the same and great. Like now you have like a look, but it's not your look. It's something that's been given to you, not that you've like honed and crafted yourself.
That's funny. I do have still, I think it's 2000. I don't know. I have a really old Adobe Photoshop. I have Photoshop about these episode covers is about the only thing I Photoshop. The rest of my workflow is in Final Cut, and I cannot justify the $40 a month or whatever it is so I do have whatever edit work. So I'm actually really terrible about that. What do you think about photographers selling presets? That just came to my mind. I see that a lot in groups and stuff.
Yeah. And people tell me that, you should sell your presets. Well, it's something maybe this is like the artist in me, but like, I'm happy to collaborate and I help other photographers. Like I teach up and coming photographers. This is what I do in Photoshop. You want to look at my workflow, but I'm not just going to hand them all my presets and my settings, because it's something personal and something I think that you should really spend the time, because ultimately that preset pack, it's not going to fix everything. Like if you don't know how to fix these things in post, that you maybe this picture is great, but there's this problem, and you're trying to find a preset that fixes it. Well, if you don't know what those issues are, like piece by piece, to really get in there and adjust sliders and things, like you're going to really struggle in those hard lighting situations, or if you weren't like ready for a moment, and I don't fault anyone for making money. Like hustle, do your thing. I'll never sell presets, and I'll never buy presets, just because I think it's such a, it's like having someone do my underpainting, like get it set up for me, and then I'll finish it off, and this is my work, and it's really not, like I want it from the ground up to be me.
Yeah, talk about you had mentioned too when you had filled out the questionnaire that you are a painter. Do you still paint? Is that something you enjoy?
It's yeah, and people tell me like, oh, you just sell your paintings, but again, it's become this very personal thing for me, and a lot of my money making thing is my photography. And so now my fun thing has become my painting. And so I think if I turned that into a source of income, it wouldn't be a fun thing anymore. But I paint, usually it's over the winter in my slow months and stuff. I love watercolor and oil. Those are my two things. We're renting and ordering right now in kind of a small space. And so I've only had the room for like watercolor, but we're buying a house in Pierce County, hopefully this coming spring. And so I want a room where I can spread out and like get really back into like oil painting. I love big canvases and things, and being that sort of classically trained painter. Michael Sassinos was my art professor at PLU, and he is fantastic. He's a painter located up here in Seattle, Tacoma area, and he's got beautiful, wonderful work. Shows if you can find him, go see his stuff. He's on sabbatical right now. I don't know where he's at, working on himself, but very talented painter. And so I would like to kind of be able to lose myself in that again when I finally have like a studio space for it.
What is that like to be able to, create art in both ways, right? Where like I couldn't draw a stick figure of anybody, right? But I can point a camera and get people to kind of do whatever. Where you're taking the photos, but then you also are able to kind of create that from scratch. What is that? Do you have one that you like more, or what? Just talk about kind of that. I don't know. Talk on that.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think the thing that helped me the most, and I took photography classes at PLU, don't get me wrong, but the most useful class that I ever had there was a figure drawing class, because you learn about light and the way it hits faces and what it does to faces. And so being able, and actually at PLU, up until this year with Michael being on sabbatical, they're not doing them, but they have open drawing nights where he'll bring in a live model and anybody can come in on Wednesdays for free and sketch and paint. And so doing those kind of things and like keeping my understanding of light and human anatomy kind of fresh really helps when you're figuring out like where the light is on an overcast day and this sort of thing. And just color theory and composition, those things really kind of blend into my photography. Because ultimately, if I can get one perfect photo that a client wants blown up on like a 30 by 40 canvas for the wall, I feel like I've succeeded. Because in this like digital age where people are getting like thousands of photos back, it's just, you're only going to print 10. Like you're going to print like 10 pictures. And if I can make those key photos like a piece of artwork, that's kind of where I feel like my success is. And so that's where I get the most like professional satisfaction. Like here are these pictures that are literally like worthy of blowing up enormously on a canvas and sticking on the wall.
My wife prints our wedding photos at Walgreens. That's probably not the best.
Oh,
but she doesn't care. Dorothy just we got them, and they're really tiny. I mean, she appreciates them, but no, I know what you mean, and I think that like maybe if we weren't kind of like in this, if I wasn't in this, and I wouldn't mind kind of looking at our photos and whatever. I mean, I think one of ours is like my email signature, and that's about all I want to see of myself on there. But I think that's cool to kind of like be able to fill, someone's home with, with art of themselves. And like you said, more like timeless too, where if you print it today and then 20 years from now, right?
They're not going to cringe looking at it. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because as people in this industry, like, I actually have already booked my photographer, because that was one stressful thing that I wanted to get out of the way for my wedding, is we're not going to get married until 2020. So we have 2 years, because I'm not cutting corners. But I booked my photographer right away, because it's someone I've worked with before. Her name's Ksenia Vastanev. She's super amazing. But I told her, I'm like, look, you're going to have a really stress-free day, because I don't want a ton of pictures of myself. Like I'm the one behind the camera. So here are like the 10 photos that I'm going to end up printing. These are what we're getting. And then otherwise relax and just capture whatever you want. And I find that's really common with the wedding vendors, is that you don't put a lot of stake in those things because you live that. So
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that. So you're recently engaged now.
Yes, I forget sometimes, and I look down at my ring, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's my turn.
Well, congratulations. What was? Give me a little backstory here. What's going on? How long have you guys been together? What was the proposal like?
So we met in we met online. It's not a super cool story, but I was like really sick one night and like up at like 3 a.m. with the flu in 2013. He had come out here from Connecticut for work. He works at the Port of Tacoma. And so he's up, he's working night shifts. So he's like on lunch or whatever, scrolling through like OkCupid. And I literally just have a picture of myself up there and I'm filling out my profile. He's the first person to message me. And I'm like, this guy, like, I don't even have any info up here. He's just messaging every single girl that pops up. He's just copy pasting. So I kind of just like brushed him off. And we kept talking for like a month, but it was like, whatever. He just... And so I go on a couple other dates, and then like in January, he finally asked me out to dinner, and I'm like, I feel like I have to. He's so nice. He was so nice, most polite, wonderful person. And so I was like, well, if he's gonna want to pay for dinner, I don't want it to be expensive. So I was like, let's go to Applebee's.
Right.
So, we get 2 for $20 microwaved food
Down in Tacoma.
We spent every Tuesday together. Well, he's off Tuesday, Wednesday. And since that day, we've spent every single Tuesday together. So it just kind of caught me by surprise. And he's such a gentleman. He's so nice. He's a little bit of a slow mover, romantically speaking. He didn't tell me he loved me until we'd already been living together. I mean, that kind of thing. And so I kind of figured the proposal would be a long time coming. It took almost 5 years, but he got there and it was perfect. And small business is super important to me. And he knows that I see a ton of wedding rings. So I'm sure the stress level for him was high. Because I see the same ring every single year. Like it's the same, whatever's in style at the moment, what they look like. I don't want to shade anybody. But so he found a nice little local shop because he knows I didn't want to go to a big chain. And he like pick and chose, like I want this band with these stones and this, and he made this beautiful ring for me. And he proposed in the Ferris wheel on Pier 57. And it was just this beautiful, perfect thing. And because he's like, well, now all the stress begins. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, I have been dying to do this. Like, I am made to plan weddings. And I was like, I already know who's going to do our cake, who's going to do our flowers. Like, being in the business, one of my oldest high school friends, she's a wonderful baker. One of my best friend's mother is a florist. Like, shout out to Ording Floral and Greenhouse. Like, so I have all these like personal connections, even beyond just the professional ones, and I've known since I was like 10, and this is before they were even a wedding venue, that I was going to get married at Northwest Trek. So lo and behold, like my 24-year-old self, however many years ago, finds out they're now a wedding venue. I'm like, hey, Northwest Trek, here we come. So yeah, and Joy there is amazing. So I've already booked that. So we're 2 years out, and within a month, I have got our photographer and our venue and our caterer taken care of. And so I'm like, Jermaine, seriously, like you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. No. And I mean, Dorothy was the same with us, where I said, I know who I want to use. I mean, I think the day after our engagement, I just texted, whoever I wanted. And, then we obviously made some decisions with other people, but, it has to make it a lot easier for him too, to kind of know. What's it been like, kind of like, obviously, you've known a lot of the people, but still like kind of like planning the wedding, in 2018, and has it been easier with all the modern stuff or harder, or what do you kind of think about that?
I've noticed there's some vendors that have their prices on their websites and some that don't. And it's frustrating for me. Like I have my prices, my packages right there. I'm very transparent to avoid any sort of awkward conversations. If like something's like over budget, like I get that, it's times are tight. And with us buying a house next year, we're not trying to get married next year. So I don't want to be closing and planning at the same time. And so just, certain things. And that's the next thing is trying to find a videographer. And okay, this is probably about what it would cost. And if they don't have a price on their website, like I'm moving on, like I'm on to the next one, because I just don't have time for that. Like I get why they do it. They want to start that conversation, get people in their inbox. but I don't want to waste anyone's time. I don't want my time wasted, you know? So if what I provide isn't like what you're looking for, or it's not in your budget, like, you know, that's the way it is. And I offer smaller packages too for people that love my work, but maybe don't want the full, you know, 8, 10, 12-hour day. I'll still like, you know, I booked up, you know, I do elopements and stuff, but also down to like 4-hour segments even. So, you know, I try to stay affordable, and so trying to find other vendors like that. You know, if I have to message you to like, you know, get your pricing information, like the introvert in me is just kind of like, I don't want to do this, because then it's going to be like a weird, I'm going to ghost you when it's not like the price point that I want. So that's been my biggest frustration. And it's been nice for me because Jermaine, no one's married in his family. He's gonna be like the first one that goes through this whole wedding process, and he's got me, so it's gonna be a full wedding. And so he's got all these like misconceptions. He's like, oh man, like wedding cakes are kind of boring. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's like vanilla cake. It's all white. And I'm like, you can have any kind of wedding cake you want. And he's like I could have a carrot cake wedding cake? And I was like, yes.
We had a carrot cake wedding cake.
I was like, anything you want. And so he's just been like, his eyes are opened up to this whole new world of like, he's like, I don't have to wear a tux. And I was like, no, we can get you a suit. Like, whatever you want. Just don't show up in like Nikes. Like, that's my only, like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, we did have carrot cake because Dorothy still to this day believes that because it has nuts in it, it's healthy for you, even though it's carrot cake. And yeah, I talked with Juliet on the podcast a couple weeks ago. She runs Everly, and we had quite a discussion about pricing on websites, and you will never convince me that it's not a good idea. I've sat at the Wedding MBA for an hour and a half with people in forums debating, pricing on and off, and you will never convince me that at least having a starting or a range on your site is not. I still think that's a bad idea because I think starting at scares people because then they might think like, oh, well, if it starts at, then that's like for an hour or nothing. But I think starting at is worse. But yeah, you will never convince me that it's not a good idea to have pricing on your site because like, and when I didn't, because I didn't know anything when I started, and I don't think I had anything, and you get emails every day, like, hey, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like I'm blowing up. And then, you'd book 1 out of 100 because, the people that were emailing you the second they saw, and not that like we were even expensive then, but you see it and then you're like, oh, I can't afford this. And then also then like you're embarrassed because then you're reaching out and then you're like, oh, I really can't afford this, or, I have no idea. It's like I was, and I'm rambling now, but I went to UPS yesterday because I'm selling stuff on eBay. And it's like when you go in there and you like have them pack something to ship it, literally it could be $20 or it could be $100. Like you go in and you're like, oh, this thing's like 3 pounds. It's just it's like a hard drive. What's this? And he's like, oh, that'll be, $28. And I'm like, oh my, I would never think they'd be $40 plus to ship this thing down to Texas. But, but it's, you shouldn't, it should be as transparent. So obviously you're enjoying the wedding planning.
Yes. And one for me too, like I see all the time when brides, they get engaged and they get married within like the same year or very soon, and they're having to cut corners and things aren't coming together right. And so I was like, look, like we're going to be engaged for like 2 years. Like I just want you to know, like it's going to be a while. I want things a certain way. I've seen a lot of weddings. I know how this goes. And everyone's like, oh, it's so stressful. It's just not for me. Like I do this every weekend. Like, people go to weddings all the time, but they don't see the 9 a.m. to the 9 p.m. that, all the, and I know a lot of people would say like, oh, I'd like to go, like Leslie likes to go with the flow. She's very chill, very relaxed. And I don't want to say I don't go with the flow, but I make the flow go. Like I'm one of those photographers who like, if you are an hour behind, that cuts into my time ultimately, because you can't go on with your hair and makeup not done. You can't skip your ceremony. You can't skip your first dances. You're going to be cutting out of my time as a photographer. And to guarantee you the product that I'm promising you, we need that time together. So obviously my first goal is to keep the bride and groom calm. And you know what? It's family. Family causes the problems. Everyone's like, do you ever have a bridezilla? Like, no, I have parents that are just awful. I had one bride, she was getting married in Seattle on the waterfront. She's got this like beach view, like a friend's house. It was beautiful, getting married on the beach. And it was sort of rainy that day. Like it was drizzling. It could barely be called drizzle. And her parents come in just, oh my God, we have to move this ceremony. It's pouring down rain, and they're freaking out. And so she starts having a full-blown panic attack. And I'm just like, Brenda, get out of here. Like, what are you doing? Like, my first concern is making sure the bride and the groom are calm and collected, and they're moving. They're doing the things they need to do. And then behind the scenes, I can be the mean guy and be like, look, get it together, get these pants on. Like, what are you doing? And ultimately, if no one is ready but my bride and groom, fine, you guys stay here. We're going to go do our thing. They're going to get beautiful pictures. Get your shit together, and then we'll talk. Like, I turn into that sort of wedding planner coordinator, because a lot of it is like working with the videographer and the DJ and the coordinator to make sure people move when they're supposed to move. So I'm adaptable, but I do not go with the flow. The flow goes with me.
I like that. No, and I mean, but nothing will, in my opinion, impede on the bride and groom, enjoyment of their wedding day, and I don't care if it's another vendor or a guest or a bridal party member, I will always defer to their enjoyment and their experience. So kind of like going through this planning process now, and maybe you were not, I was pretty like unaware of what my clients were going through planning the wedding until I kind of went, and I was like, oh wow. And now I always say like, I'm a much better wedding vendor now, having kind of gone through that and done the like 9 o'clock at night, like, okay, we have 10 minutes right now. Like we need to figure out, what we're walking down the aisle to or whatever. Like, what has that been like? Do you feel like that's going to affect kind of how you work with couples moving forward? Or did you feel like you were already pretty like empathetic towards that?
I think I had a pretty good grasp on it, but I didn't really realize how tight the timeline can get when you have things that are important, because I'm always telling my couples, like, budget as much time as you can for photos. Like, that's just, you're going to have a better product in the end. And so the problem there is that a lot of times if they don't do the first look, we're doing that after the ceremony and people are waiting around, which is part of what drew me to Northwest Trek, because I'm seeing that happen to my couples, that their guests are kind of getting antsy and they're hungry. And so at Northwest Trek, after the ceremony, the guests get a tram ride. So they're occupied with things. And so I think that's really going to change how I talk to my brides about their timelines. Like, think about your guest experience and what they're going to be doing, but also give me as much photo time as you can. Because ultimately, you're going to get the nicest video photo. The more they can spend together, the better, because they're pulled in so many directions. And we're trying to keep that in the back of my mind on my wedding day. Like, I'm going to have a million people trying to talk to me. And as a wedding professional, I do not like when wrenches are thrown in my gears. Like, if you derail my plans, it's not good for anybody. And so I'm trying to remember, just know that I'm going to have a million people trying to talk to me and congratulate me. And I'm sure actually getting to go through the wedding experience. And the biggest thing for me, was the pricing thing. Just, it reiterated the transparency that's required there, because it's so frustrating. It's like going to a restaurant and the drinks don't have prices and you're like, oh no.
I always assume, oh my God, must be like $20 a drink. Because you always assume the worst, right?
Yes.
If they just have drinks with no prices, you're like, oh, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
I always thought that no, we can't.
It's like, oh no, we got vodka at home.
Yeah.
We can do that later.
No, but I think guest experience, yes. I think that a lot of weddings I've been to, yes, like if you're not in the bridal party or like the family, sometimes it's kind of like, and whether it's waiting around and, I mean, I think like cocktail hour and like pumping them full of food and stuff. But, I think obviously too, like having a good DJ, kind of like letting people know what's happening, and then a planner and, things like that, kind of like letting people know. But it is tough that, to kind of like, it's a lot of different balls to have to balance, like as someone getting married, right? Like you need to have fun, but then you also have to like, your family wants to do stuff or want to move the ceremony if it's raining. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to balance, right?
Yeah. Well, with us too, we're very limited with their ceremony space because we want to get married on the deck there on the Horseshoe Lake. And they're like, well, the capacity for this is like 80 people. And we're like, oh my God, like my dad's side of the family is like 120 people by itself, like just my dad's side. And so we're just, we're going to kind of cut it down to just, immediate family for the ceremony. But then it's like, okay, well, everyone else who gets invited to the reception for food and drinks and stuff, like I want to make sure they feel like they haven't missed out on too much. And so we need to extend the time and, do we have enough food? And so it becomes this, I'm the kind of person who I'm so used to pleasing like clients and their families and making sure everyone else is like taken care of that I am like, Jermaine has to keep telling me like, this is our wedding. Like, if they're not happy about the hors d'oeuvres that you picked, then who cares? They can bring chicken nuggets. Like, we'll microwave that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, just do what you are going to be the least stressed doing. And for me, being least stressed is being everyone else being happy. But I have to remember, like, it's my wedding. I'm going to be paying a bunch of money for it. So I need to just do what I want. And I think that's what so many brides get caught up in. And I didn't really realize that until I had to start making those decisions myself. Because before I was like, oh, whatever, like they can just do whatever. Don't worry about them. But they're going to be worried about that. And so that's been like the biggest thing I think for me too, is just, oh my gosh, I'm considering all these people's feelings. And I always tell my brides, well, don't worry about anybody else, but it's really hard.
Well, yeah. And I will say two things. One, as someone that did get married, like I was the worst in terms of like letting go. So learn from me and let go, because I was very bad about that, to the point that like I was trying to get the live stream going and like Rebecca, my planner, was like literally like pulling me away to sign the license so we could walk down the aisle. And two, yeah, I think it's really easy when you're working and like, even if it's like you're getting ready for a first look and like, oh, let's get the groom in position or whatever. And then like maybe takes you an extra 15 minutes and like, oh, he's there. He's fine. Like he'll be there. Right. And like he's standing there and it's like 100 degrees outside. He's sweating. Like if that was me, I would be really, pissed off about it. And so it is really easy when you're working like, oh, your grandparents can just wait over there for a minute. But then when it's your grandparents and you're like, oh no, like I don't want them to wait. Like I want to, I don't want my guests to wait, so it's tough. Right.
Well, yeah, just thinking about like, well, and even to the first look is trying to tell Jermaine, like, you guys, you need to make sure like your groomsmen are like dressed and you need to like, I'm not going to be there doing my normal thing, like snapping at people, like get it together, put your suspenders on. Why isn't your tie tied? And so I think my struggle is going to be, like you said, like letting go and being like, you know what? I have to trust them that they can put their pants on without someone telling them to, even though everything I know as a wedding photographer is that they will not put their pants on unless someone tells them to. And so those, like keeping those things like out of my mind is going to be really, really difficult. And that's a really good point, is that like, you got to remember who the important people are to the couple the day of too. Because ultimately mom and dad, I end up having all the drama comes from like mothers. I had one mother of the bride have a meltdown because she didn't have a bouquet. They had gotten her a corsage, but not her own bouquet. And they actually had to take apart the bridesmaid's bouquet so they could make her one to get her to stop freaking out. And so, and even with that being said, these are the important people that you have to get along with that day to get these nice pictures, because if they're sour and everything, it's going to look awful. And in talking this past year, I've been like polling my brides and my friends that have been married, like, what would you do different? What was important? And a lot of them had lost parents in the last couple of years. And like, I go back to my wedding photos, there's like 2 photos of my mom and now she's gone. And so I really, have tried this year to focus on like, where are those people? And like, you know what? Those are the people that are going to be putting up your decorations and things, and make sure you bring them in to get these photos and to be with you and delegate to other people, And so my mom's going to be that person who's setting tables and things for me. And I'm going to have to be like, no, set that down. Like, come be with me. So that's probably something I've learned for my own wedding in that sense, is seeing everyone's parents being so absent for photos, and during the day of, I'm going to have to like wrangle them in. And I've seen too many officiants this year butcher names and get them wrong. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just get my dad to do it. So he's gonna get ordained, and you know that I've had this weird, maybe not, I shouldn't call it weird, this like feminist ideal that I'm gonna walk myself down the aisle and no one's giving me away and I'm my own person. And my dad's very traditional, of course he would love that. But I was like, you know what? This is where we'll meet in the middle, because what better gift to my extroverted father than to let him talk through the host ceremony? So that's a concession I've made there. But
I did have, and I would challenge my brides this year to find. I did have one ceremony this year where the officiant got the bride's name wrong. I don't know if, I mean, it wasn't like anybody noticed, but then I ended up having to like pull it from later in the ceremony when they said it and kind of like dub it back in. Yeah. And so, but like, the video starts out and it would be like, I mean, it was not. And I had to play it to Dorothy. I'm like, am I hearing this right? She said, oh no, that's definitely not the right name. So I would challenge anybody to find that on the videos this year. But yeah, no, that's great that your dad's going to do that. I've had a lot of like family members and stuff officiate. I think that's great. Is he excited for that? Is he nervous?
Oh yeah. I think everyone else is nervous and he's excited. We're going to try to give him at least a structure of a script. I know there's going to be a lot of ad-libbing. That's just kind of what he does. He's a very good public speaker. But I think everyone's a little bit nervous about giving him just free reign up there. So we'll probably have a sit down and be like, okay, here's how the direction we'd like it to go. Let's work within this construct here. But yeah, my mom, I think, is the most nervous. She's like, you're really going to let your father get up there with a microphone? Yeah, he's excited. He's going to have his own like Britney Spears microphone, on the side there. And
then did you say you guys are going to meet then and walk down? Is that
Jermaine will be up there and then I'm just going to walk down the aisle by myself because I'm a strong, independent woman. And
you don't
exactly. So
the best, I just thought about this. The best one we ever had was the dad, walked her down the aisle. And they said, oh, like, who gives this woman away? And he said, well, we raised our daughter to be strong and independent. And like, so she gives herself away today. And he said, I'm just here to be arm candy. And because he was a total clown. But it was great because it was like, you don't necessarily need to like, I think that's awesome. I think it's good. So moving now kind of into next season and continuing to kind of like grow and develop your brand and business, kind of how is that going and what are your goals for that?
I think I actually just redid my website and I don't know why I took this on in the spring because I was like, oh, I don't have anything booked in like April. Like I have this whole month to do this. And then suddenly I'm getting like last minute calls like, hey, we're getting married at the courthouse here. And like suddenly I have 4 weddings in April. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And my website is down. And so it was like a month of me like going home after a wedding and like frantically working on my website, and I had just updated like my logo and things, and I'm printing new business cards all in the middle of like preparing for wedding season. It was like the worst thing I could have done, but I'm really happy with like just the clean sort of like, I just really love a clean sort of timeless look, very square, black and white kind of, other than the photos obviously. And then I just, again, I stress the timeless quality of pictures because I want you to look at them forever and be able to be happy about them and they're not going to look dated and things like that. I try to stay just really true. Skin tones are like the bread and butter. Like if my skin tones are right and everything else is a little off, like I can deal with that, but I can't. I don't like the really high contrast look with like yellowy skin tones. It's like really popular now too. And it doesn't look real. It's just too much contriving of an image there. And don't get me wrong, I love Photoshop. I will be the first person to like take 10 pictures of like the leaf throwing, and Photoshop all the leaves in for one nice photo because they're always just in one big clump, And so, I absolutely am down to do that. But for me, that's realism in the sense that you're capturing like the magic of that moment and, not necessarily just like amping up your contrast and like putting some Instagram-y filter. I mean, that's why Pinterest and Instagram are like awesome, but they've kind of created this, I don't know, this lane for like hyper trendy things. Like I always barns are like the thing right now. And, you know, especially in Pierce County, the rustic look is very popular. Everyone loves barns. And I'm just like, but so we go to, you know, Fort Stelicum, these huge, you know, red barns people love. And we'll spend 10 minutes there. But like, I promise, let me take you around the lake. Let me take you through the field and the trees. Like, your favorite pictures are not going to be the barns. Like, I promise. Like, you'll have them and you'll love them. But let me pull you away from these and like go other places too. You know.
Have you seen that guy on Facebook that like makes fun of the girl getting proposed to and like staging the photo, and then he does the one with the barn where he's like, "Why are we in front of the barn?" Like, I don't know. I live in the city. Let's come out here. Where's my flannel shirt?
We just bought these cowboy boots today.
Yeah. No, but you know, it's. Yeah, I don't, you know, I never get too much say because I kind of got to do whatever, you know, whatever they want. And especially kind of whatever the photographer wants. I'm usually just like, I don't know if I would have them stand here, but we'll make it look, you know, we'll make it look good. So you said you do a lot of weddings and then elopements. Do you have a strong preference for one or the other, or do you?
You know, I actually really, really, really love courthouse ceremonies, you know, and obviously they don't make as much money, but it's nice because they're on weekdays when the courthouse is open. So I usually don't have anything going on those days. And it's so nice and intimate because my favorite part of the wedding day is just being with the couple, doing their first look photos, just doing their portraits together. And for me, everything else is kind of extra. Other than the immediate family is of course really important, but the most important are just those two people and the commitment they're making to each other. And so like elopements and like the courthouse ceremonies they really are my favorite just for that reason. Obviously they're not my wallet's favorite, you know, because a 2-hour like thing isn't going to bring in as much money. But really I try to not take on weddings that are too big because it just becomes too much. And it's too much stress. It requires just too much everything. And so I kind of aim for their weddings that are kind of in that, you know, 50 to 150 guest range instead of like the big 200, 300, 400 guests. Like it's a lot. And this year too, I'm being more selective. I had a great year this last year. I had some weekends where I had a wedding Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it killed me. Like it really did. And so I was like, you know what? One wedding a weekend this year. I'm gonna really try to stick to my guns on that. And it would take a really special couple to like make me double book a weekend at this point because it was too much to do like 10-hour days, 3 days in a row, and I just, you know, go home and download everything and then like try to get some sleep for the next day.
Yeah, it's because it's not only you know, it's a 10-hour day, but it's like it's an intent, you know, it's a different kind of 10 hours than you know, than a normal. And I know you mean about weddings too. We had a wedding a couple years ago, and we had auctioned it off as part of a fundraiser, and it wasn't kind of our normal clientele. And like I knew the photographer and a bunch of the people there, and I was like, this is not like our, like I put retainer jokes in our wedding videos. Like this is really not kind of I mean, we can do it, you know, I'm happy to do it and rein it in and really kind of amp up the class. But yeah, I mean, I like a little bit more like casual. I think that's good.
One thing I'm doing that I've never seen anybody do. My vendors are very important to me. I know them. I work with them. I'm going to spend the most time with my vendors the day of my wedding than anybody. And they will have a spot at a real table to sit and eat food. Like, I can't stress enough, like, think about your vendors and the fact that they're there and that they need to eat something and drink something. And the 15 minutes they take to like shovel food into their mouth in like a corner of the venue away from everybody, they still have people coming up to them like, hey, you take our picture? As I'm like swallowing like fried rice. I'm like, I will be here for like 6 more hours. Like I promise. Like just let me eat this small plate in the corner standing up. Like, and so my vendors, I'm going to make sure that they're going to go through the buffet line before everybody else. Like my vendors are going to go through, get food, sit at their table that is just for them and eat a meal like a real person. Like that was something I told Jermaine. We're going to be paying for this buffet for all these extra people because they're going to get to eat and sit down and breathe. Because I find that I don't take those moments to like be a regular person when I'm working. I'm on all the time, and I'm in my extroverted mode, and I'm pulling people here and there. And I just, sometimes people don't treat vendors like a person.
Well, and I mean, normally it's the venue, it's never, I've always, I've told my couples, like, it's never been a couple that doesn't want us to get fed. It's always a venue. And it's, unfortunately, it's usually a lot of the nicer venues, or what would be considered kind of quote unquote the nicer, is usually where we have, I wouldn't throw any specifics under the bus, but I mean, there's like consistently like certain places, and you're like, why is this? Why is this? Because like we got married at Salty's, and like when they gave us like our initial budget, we said, I don't know, 150 people or whatever, and then they had like 20 vendor meals, or like just added on, and it was just like, I was like, and at the time I thought, oh, this must be what everybody does, because I never planned a wedding and gotten the budget, and I was like, oh no, that's definitely not. Oh yeah, they don't know.
Yeah, I've had venues where they'll flag us down, like, well, we have your meals in the kitchen, and they'll have like a whole meal for us, and it's wonderful. And I think it's just something that couples maybe don't realize, that like, your caterer might not care about your vendors necessarily, so make sure that's something you think about. And like, because really, like, the couples that I work with, I'm sure they wouldn't like purposefully like not plan for me to eat. And so at this point, I now mention it, like, I'm going to need like 20 minutes. And if you don't want to provide a meal, that's okay. Like, I just need to be able to plan and that sort of thing. But it's just, I feel like they just don't realize how hard it is sometimes for us to sneak in that like 10-minute quickly eaten meal. And we still have people like, hey, come over here. And I'm like, just a second, please. I need to pee. I had one bride get really upset because she couldn't find me for 5 minutes while I was peeing. And I was like, I'm sorry. I just really had to go.
It's tough. Our friends got married, and I won't say which friend or which wedding, but I was doing their video, and I had helped them find their photographer and everything. And so I had a seat with my wife, and I look over, because we're like, table 2, because my wife's in the bridal party. And then, they're like standing in the back, and I'm like, well, F this, So I go over and I said, man, are you guys, oh no, we haven't gotten any food yet. And so, they're bringing out. And it's, I think it was plated. It wasn't buffet. And I said, hey, just curious, they need to feed. Oh, we don't, we got to get all these, plates out. And I said, well, but it's obviously, you guys know how many people are here, right? If it's like 150 people and 10 vendors, it's 160 plates. Like, it doesn't matter if they get plates 10, 11, 12, or 1, 55, 6, and 7. And she was like, well, we're busy taking care of the guests right now, so we will, deal with you guys will whatever. And I said, well, I'm a guest and I'm a vendor, but I'm a guest of the bride and groom. And so I said, they need to eat. Oh, so they ended up bringing out 2 plates apiece for all of them to eat. Like, they came over, they had like a tray with like 6 plates. I was like, man, I said, this is, because they would have just ran them. If I hadn't been there as a guest too, and if I would have said, man, I'm sitting with I'm with the bride and groom right now, it would have been, wouldn't have been good. So,
well, it's really too, it's best for those vendors to eat first, so they can finish first and then be there with their bride and groom when they're done, because no one wants their picture taken while they're eating. So
no, they don't. And it's, I mean, if they want to, I'll film it. But yeah, it's always like, let's just wait.
People giving you the side eye while they have like spaghetti hanging out of their mouth. Like, why are you filming me?
The best is when you want them to go to the one side of the table to like, we got to do, or like a lot of like Chinese and Asian weddings, and they want to do like, you do it with every table.
The games and things.
Well, or like you just get them on the way, they go table to table. But they're like, they'll be like afraid to like leave their plate. Like, they won't want to go to the other. It's like, you're going to be back in 30 seconds. Like, this plate, your food's not going anywhere. But it is like, once you get your food, and you're very like defensive about that. Well, as we're trailing off, I want to thank you so much for coming in today and saving me and getting this going and taking the time today. And we had just emailed yesterday about this and this morning. And so I want to thank you so much, and your dedication and making the time. If people want to learn more about you, your photography company, see all your images, what would you have them do?
My website is jaedareedphotography.com. It's Jaeda, that extra vowel, and Reed is Reed. You can also find it at jadereed.photography. Very cool, like hip hash or web URL there. JadeReed.com will also take you there. And then on Instagram, you can find me at Jaeda Reed Photography too. Same on Facebook. It's kind of all one uniform thing. And I'm so bad at social media because I'm not the kind of person who's like on it a lot in my personal life. But I've told myself like this year I'm gonna post more. So that's what I'm doing this winter, prepping for engagement season. Just like I'm gonna be social media good. There's no word for it.
Well, good. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thank you so much.